The room went quiet. Dead quiet. The kind of silence that happens when you say something you can't take back, except this time, I wasn't the one who said it. I was standing at the back of the Grand Manor Ballroom in Chicago, wearing a second-hand suit I'd picked up 3 weeks before, watching my son's bride raise a champagne glass like she was about to crown herself royalty. Her name was Harper, and in about 30 seconds, she was going to humiliate me in front of 300 people. I remember exactly what she said because those words burned themselves into my brain like a brand. She smiled that smile. You know the one, the kind that looks beautiful but feels like a knife. Then she turned to the crowd and said, "I'm just so thankful my husband rose above his humble beginnings. Not everyone can leave low-class roots behind." The guests laughed. Some polite chuckles, some genuine. My son, Eli, my only child, the boy I raised alone after his mother died, he just stared at his glass. Didn't defend me. Didn't say a word. Just looked down like he was suddenly very interested in the champagne bubbles. That's when everything changed. That's when I stopped being proud and started being ready. My name is Franklin Marsh. I'm 63 years old, retired from 35 years of working as an auto mechanic in Dayton, Ohio. I've got grease under my fingernails that no amount of soap can completely wash away, and I've made peace with that a long time ago. I didn't come from money. I didn't go to private school or network at country clubs. I raised my son with my own 2 hands after losing the love of my life, and I did the best I could with what I had. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. We're so glad you're here with us. Welcome to the family, and get ready, because this story's about to get a whole lot more interesting. Enjoy what's coming. But see, the thing about being underestimated is that people stop looking at you. They look right through you. They see the worn-out truck and the calloused hands and they make their judgment, then they move on. They don't expect anything from you. They don't suspect you of being smart enough, connected enough, or resourceful enough to do much of anything. And that's where they make their first mistake. Before Harper humiliated me at that reception, I already knew the truth about her family. All of it. The fake names, the rented estates, the talent agency contracts. I had receipts. I had emails. I had photos. And I had decided that when the moment came, when she finally pushed too hard and said the wrong thing, I was going to let the whole world see exactly what low class really meant. The question is, what would you do if someone you loved chose his pride over your dignity? If you've ever been written off by someone you were supposed to matter to, you need to hear what happened next. Let me take you back about 10 years. Back to when life made sense, when my son still knew who he was. I need you to understand where I came from before you can understand what was lost. I was 28 years old when my wife gave birth to Eli. The hospital waiting room was packed with family. My parents, her parents, cousins, aunts, uncles. Everyone excited, everyone waiting for that first look at the baby boy. When the nurse brought him out, wrapped in that blue blanket, I remember thinking I'd never seen anything so perfect in my entire life. Like I'd been given something I didn't know I needed. Something worth protecting. I worked at Morrison's auto shop back then, the same place I worked for most of my career. Honest work. The kind of work where you show up, you do what you're paid to do, and at the end of the day, you can point to something and say, "That's what I fixed today. That truck's running because of me." There's something real about that. Something that matters. My wife, Sarah, she was a nurse at Riverside Hospital. Smart woman. Kind woman. We had plans. We were going to pay off the house. Save for Eli's college. Build something solid. The kind of life where you sleep at night knowing you did it the right way. Then Eli was 10 years old, and everything fell apart. Sarah got sick. Fast. The kind of sick that doesn't give you time to prepare, doesn't give you time to say goodbye properly. Cancer. In 6 months, she was gone. I remember standing in that cemetery on a gray October morning, holding Eli's hand and thinking, now it's just us. Now I have to do this alone. But I wasn't angry about being alone. I was determined. I made a promise standing over her grave that I wasn't going to let our son become a kid who grew up angry or bitter. He was going to know he was loved. He was going to learn that hard work meant something. He was going to understand that the person you are matters a lot more than the stuff you own. So I became his father and his mother. I packed his lunches. I helped with homework. I took him to soccer practice and waited in the car reading magazines during his games. I taught him how to change a tire, how to change oil, how to fix a water heater, how to treat people with respect whether they drove a Mercedes or a beat-up sedan. When he graduated high school, he was one of the top students in his class. Full scholarship to Ohio State University. I remember crying that night, actually crying, because I knew he was going to be okay. He was going to be more than okay. He was going to be the kind of man his mother would have been proud of. 4 years later, he graduated with honors. Degree in business administration. Job offer waiting at a marketing firm in Chicago. He was building something real, something honest. He was becoming exactly the kind of man I'd raised him to be. And then he met Harper Quinn, and everything I'd taught him seemed to stop mattering the moment she walked into his life. I'll never forget the day Eli called me and said, "Dad, I met someone special." He was excited. I was excited for him. I'd been waiting for him to find a good woman, someone who got him, someone who understood that the foundation matters more than the fancy paint job. "That's great, buddy," I said. "I want to meet her." 3 weeks later, Harper came to visit. She came on a Saturday morning in early spring. Eli pulled up in his car, a nice sedan he'd bought with his own money, and out stepped this woman in designer sunglasses and a dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She was beautiful. I'll give her that. Tall, blonde, the kind of polish that you can't achieve without spending serious money on your appearance. But the moment she walked into my house, something shifted. I saw it in her face. That quick scan of the living room. That way her nose wrinkled, just slightly, like she'd walked into a room that smelled bad. My house isn't fancy. Never has been. It's a small 2-story in a working-class neighborhood. I've got comfortable furniture, nothing matched, all of it paid for, and pictures on the walls of Eli's childhood, his mother, family memories. The floors are clean. The place is taken care of. But it's not decorated by someone with money. It's decorated by someone with history. "Your home is cozy," Harper said, and I knew immediately what she meant. What she was really saying. Your home is small. Your home is old. Your home is not what I'm used to. I was nice about it. I smiled and said, "Well, it's not much, but it's mine. Everything in here was earned the hard way." I even offered her coffee. I was trying. For Eli, I was trying. She smiled that smile, the one I would come to know so well, and said, "That's so quaint." Quaint. Like I was a vintage decoration. Like my life was something you'd find in an antique shop. Eli didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't say anything. He was too busy watching Harper move through the house like she owned it, like she was already imagining how she'd change everything if she got the chance. I caught her looking at my hands while we sat at the kitchen table. I'd been working on a neighbor's truck that morning. Nothing heavy, just some routine maintenance, and I hadn't completely cleaned off the grease. It was under my fingernails, in the creases of my palms. Work hands. Honest hands. Her eyes traced across them like she was looking at something that didn't fit in her world. "So you're still working on cars?" she asked, and there was something in the way she phrased it, like I should have moved on to something else by now. Something that didn't involve getting dirty. "Yeah," I said. "I just retired, actually. But I still take on work here and there. Keeps me sharp." Keeps me connected to people I care about. She nodded like she understood, but I knew she didn't. Not really. What I didn't know then was that Harper was already sizing me up. Already deciding where I fit in her world. And the answer, I would eventually learn, was barely anywhere at all. The distance started slowly. That's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't announce itself. It creeps in like a shadow, getting bigger and darker until one day you realize the sun's been gone for hours and you didn't even notice when it happened. After that first visit, Eli started changing. Not all at once. Gradually. Little things. He bought new clothes, expensive stuff from stores I'd never heard of. He started talking differently. Words like networking and brand awareness and social positioning entered his vocabulary. Where did my son learn to talk like that? When did he decide that how you looked and who you knew mattered more than who you actually were? He'd come home less often. When he did visit, he'd spend half the time on his phone. The other half, he'd be giving me these looks, like he was embarrassed. Like my house embarrassed him. Like I embarrassed him. One day he walked in and said, "Dad, why don't you ever upgrade that truck? It's an eyesore. What does it say about you, driving something like that?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I barely recognized the kid standing in my living room. "It says I paid for it with money I earned," I told him. "It says I'm not worried about impressing people with things I don't need. It says I'm the same man who raised you." He didn't respond. He just went quiet. That was worse than arguing. The silence was like a door closing. Then came the engagement party planning. I didn't hear about it directly. Eli mentioned it in passing, so casual, like it wasn't important that his own father might want to celebrate his engagement. I had to ask if I was invited. "About that," he said, and I could already tell I wasn't going to like where this was going. Harper's family is very particular about appearances. They like to keep these things small. Exclusive. Small. Exclusive. Terms that mean you're not what we need you to be. "So I'm not invited," I said. "It's not like that, Dad. It's just, Harper thinks. Your fiancé thinks I'm not good enough. That's what you're telling me." He didn't deny it. That was his answer right there. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break. Crack. Like a fault line in concrete. I'd raised this boy. I'd taught him values. I'd shown him by example that integrity meant something. And somewhere along the way, he decided that what I'd taught him was something to rise above. The next month, another moment. We were at dinner, just the two of us at his apartment, which was fancy, by the way. Sleek furniture. Modern art on the walls. Nothing with history. Nothing with meaning. Just the kind of place you'd rent to show people you had money. Harper called while we were eating. Eli answered on the first ring. Of course he did. "Hey babe," he said, and his entire demeanor changed. Softer. More eager. Like he was a different person. I couldn't hear her side of the conversation, but I could hear his responses. "Yeah, I know. I'll talk to him about it." After he hung up, he didn't eat for a few minutes. He just pushed the food around his plate. "What did she say?" I asked. "She's worried about the wedding," he said quietly. "She thinks maybe you shouldn't come." The words hit me like a punch. "Shouldn't come to my son's wedding. She thinks you might." "I don't know, Dad. She thinks you might say something that embarrasses us. She says people judge you by your family, and..." I set down my fork. "And I'm a liability." He didn't answer. That was 6 months before the reception. 6 months of wondering if I'd even be wanted there. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was sitting in my mailbox when I got home from running errands. Gold lettering on cream cardstock. Wax seal. The whole thing screamed money. It screamed, "This is not for people like you." And yet somehow, my name was on it. The marriage of Eli Marsh and Harper Quinn, the Grand Manor, Chicago, formal attire required. I stared at that invitation for a long time. Part of me didn't want to go. Part of me wanted to frame it and write across it, "Thanks, but I'm not good enough." But that wasn't who I was. That wasn't who I'd raised my son to be, either. So I decided I was going to show up. I was going to be the bigger person. I was going to look my best and celebrate my son's wedding like a father should. I went to a second-hand suit store downtown. Found a navy blue suit that fit reasonably well. It wasn't designer. It wasn't new. But it was clean, and it was respectable. I polished my dress shoes until I could almost see my reflection in them. I rented a car for the drive to Chicago because I wasn't about to show up in that eyesore truck, even though part of me wanted to do exactly that just to prove a point. The day before the wedding, I put my gift in a box. I'd carved a wooden keepsake box out of oak, spent 3 months on it, actually. Detailed work. I'd learned woodworking from my father, and it was something that kept me connected to him. Inside the box, I put a small framed photo of Eli and his mother. Sarah was holding him when he was about 6 months old, and they were both laughing. It was the last good photo we took before she got sick. I'd written a card to go with it. It said, "Son, every moment matters. Don't spend your life chasing moments that don't." I didn't know if he'd understand it then. I didn't know if he'd understand it ever. But I was about to show everyone at that wedding exactly what mattered and what didn't. The Grand Manor was even more impressive than I'd imagined. When I pulled up in that rented car, I felt like I was arriving at a palace. Marble steps leading up to oak doors. Valets in uniforms. Guests in clothes that probably cost more than my annual pension. Everything about this place screamed success and wealth and a world I didn't belong in. And that's when I realized something. I didn't belong in that world, but my son did. And Harper was going to use that fact to tear apart everything we'd built together. But she didn't know I was ready for her yet. I stood at the back of that ballroom for about 20 minutes before the ceremony started, and I watched something that made my blood run cold. I watched Harper's family arrive. There was her father, tall, distinguished-looking, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He walked in like he owned the place, shaking hands, making an entrance. I'd never met him before, but Eli had told me he was some kind of business tycoon. Self-made millionaire. Real success story. Except I'd already done my research. I'd already hired Ray. Ray used to bring his truck to Morrison's auto shop about 5 years back. Had a transmission problem that everyone else said was unfixable. I took one look at it, figured out the real issue, fixed it in an afternoon. He was grateful, really grateful. Started coming back whenever something went wrong with his vehicles. Over the years, we developed a friendship of sorts. The kind where you know a person well enough to ask them for something serious. Ray had moved into private investigation work after he left the police force. So when I started noticing the inconsistencies about Harper's family, the way certain family stories didn't add up, the way her mother's fashion design business seemed to have no online presence at all, no record of any actual work, I called him. "Ray," I said over coffee one afternoon, about 4 months before the wedding. "I need you to look into someone for me." He knew immediately it was serious. He nodded and said, "Who?" "My son's fiancée. And her family. I just have a feeling something's not right." Ray didn't ask a lot of questions. He just got to work. What he found took my breath away. Harper's father wasn't a business tycoon. His real name wasn't even the one he used. He was an actor, registered with a talent agency in New York that specialized in something called high-end lifestyle services. Translation: they hired people to pretend to be rich, to play the part, for weddings, for events, for people who wanted to look more impressive than they actually were. Her mother, same thing. Her cousins, her uncles, her aunts, every single person who'd been introduced to my son as his new extended family. All actors, all hired, all playing a part in an elaborate fiction. And the person funding the whole thing, my son. Every single penny. Ray showed me the receipts. Rental agreements for the family estates. Payment invoices to the talent agency. Credit card charges under Eli's name for what amounted to thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. All of it designed to make Harper look like she came from old money, like she was a woman of real class and standing. I sat in Ray's office reading through those documents, and I remember thinking, how much did my son hate himself to want to marry into this lie so badly? How much did he believe in status over substance? Now, standing at the back of that ballroom, watching these paid actors mingle with real guests, I could see it all clearly. The way they moved, a little too performed, a little too conscious of being watched. The way they laughed at jokes that weren't funny. The way Harper's father kept checking his phone, probably waiting for the performance to be over so he could collect his paycheck. These weren't family members. They were props. And my son had paid for every single one. The ceremony was beautiful. Eli and Harper exchanged vows under an arch of white flowers, and when I watched my son say, "I promise to love you for who you really are," I felt like I was going to be sick. Because the woman he was marrying had constructed her entire identity from a lie. And he was paying for the privilege. What would you do if you discovered your own child was living in a fantasy? If the person they chose to spend their life with was literally fake? That's what was going through my mind as I stood there in my second-hand suit, watching this whole production unfold. But I didn't lose my nerve. I didn't march up there and say something. I just waited. Because I'd already planned exactly how this was going to end. During the reception, I found Ray outside by the valet station. He was there because I'd asked him to be. We didn't talk for long, just a quick confirmation. He handed me a folder with one hand while appearing to check his phone, and then he disappeared back into the crowd. Nobody noticed. Nobody was looking at the old mechanic in the second-hand suit. Inside that folder was everything I needed. Photos, documents, copies of contracts, payment records, email chains between Harper and the talent agency coordinator where she literally discussed which family members to hire for which events. It was all there. Proof of a conspiracy that made my son complicit in a massive fraud. I sat at a table near the back and held that folder in my lap, and I let myself feel what I needed to feel. Anger, betrayal, disappointment so deep it was like a physical weight in my chest. My son had known about this. There was no way he didn't know. The emails showed her asking him for approval on which actors to hire. He'd chosen to marry a woman who lied professionally. And he'd paid for the privilege. Around 7 o'clock, the speeches started. Uncles on Harper's side talked about what an honor it was to be part of this beautiful union. Cousins told embarrassing stories about Harper's childhood. Eli's best man from college told some funny memories from their days at Ohio State. It was all very warm, very touching, very fake. Then Harper stood up. I watched her walk to the microphone. She was radiant in her dress. I'll give her that. She wore her lies like jewelry. She held that microphone like she was born to hold it, and she smiled at the crowd like they were her audience and she was performing for them. Because that's what she was. A performer. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she began, "to have found a man who's as ambitious as he is kind." She looked at Eli with those practiced eyes, and he smiled back like he believed every word. Eli has always been someone who understands that success matters, that image matters, that knowing the right people matters. I felt my jaw tighten, but I stayed still. "I'm especially grateful," she continued, "that my husband was willing to rise above his humble beginnings." Here, she turned and looked directly at me. Not by accident. On purpose. Like she wanted to make sure I knew exactly what she was saying and to whom. Not everyone can leave low-class roots behind. Not everyone has the strength to become someone completely different from where they came from. The guests laughed. It was polite laughter, the kind that happens when someone makes a joke they're not sure is a joke. And Eli, my son, just looked down at his glass. That was it. That was my line in the sand. Because in that moment, he made a choice. He chose to let his bride humiliate me. He chose silence over loyalty. He chose her over me. And I decided right then that the truth deserved to come out. I pulled out my phone. I'd had a USB drive prepared with all of Ray's findings. I'd already sent the files to the projector system that was set up behind the stage, the same projector that was currently displaying a slideshow of wedding photos. I'd paid the A/V coordinator $200 to make sure I'd have access, and he'd been happy to take it. I had one button to push. Just one. Everything was going to change in the next few minutes, and there was no taking it back. But I was done being humiliated. I was done watching my son turn his back on me. And I was absolutely done with Harper Quinn's lies. So I pushed the button. The room didn't realize what was happening at first. The slideshow was still playing behind the stage, so when new images started appearing, people thought it was part of the planned presentation. Some guests even looked back with interest, wondering what cute wedding photos were coming next. Then the first screenshot appeared, and I watched the recognition dawn on people's faces. It was an image from the talent agency website. Harper's father, in full profile, with his real name and his acting credentials. Professional headshot and everything. The caption underneath read, "Available for high-end lifestyle event services." The room went quiet. Slowly, very slowly, quiet. The next image appeared. Harper's mother. Same thing. Another actor. Another profile. Another line, specializes in wealthy family portrayal. Then came the emails. Long screenshots of conversations between Harper and the talent agency coordinator. Need a convincing uncle with financial background. Need 3 aunts who can discuss designer fashion convincingly. Need a father figure who plays well with old money. I stood up and walked to the center of the room. I kept my voice calm, but I made sure everyone could hear me. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, "but I thought your guests deserved to know the truth." Harper's face went white. Actually white. The color just drained out of it like someone had pulled a plug. "What is this?" one of the guests near the front demanded. "What are we looking at?" I didn't answer them. I looked at Eli instead. "Son," I said, "your bride hired actors to play her family. Every single person who's been introduced to you as her rich, successful relatives is a professional performer on a payroll. And you paid for all of it." "Dad, you don't understand," Eli started to say, standing up, but I wasn't finished. More images flashed on the screen. Credit card statements. Payment receipts. Rental agreements for properties that appeared in the background of photos, all staged venues, not actual homes. "How much did you spend, Eli? 50,000? 100,000? The guests were buzzing now. I could see the shock on their faces. The betrayal. This was real money, real family name, real scandal. "And here's the part nobody else knows," I continued. I pointed at the screen as another image appeared. It was an email from Harper to the talent agency coordinator, dated 3 weeks before our first wedding planning meeting. The subject line read, "He needs to think I'm high society. Can you make that happen?" She built this lie specifically to trap my son, I said. And she did it because she knew that Eli, my bright, hard-working son who should have been proud of where he came from, had already decided he was ashamed of me. I looked at Harper directly then. You called me low-class tonight. But at least everything about me is real. I worked for what I have. I didn't hire actors to pretend I was something I'm not. I didn't construct an entire fake family just to impress someone. Harper tried to speak, but no words came out. And you, I said to Eli, turning to face him. You taught my son that being honest wasn't enough. You taught him that having class meant having money. You taught him to be ashamed of the man who raised him. Well, congratulations. You've got his attention now. The room was in complete chaos. I could hear people talking, could see some guests standing up, could see Harper's hired family trying to figure out what to do. Some of the actors were actually doing what actors do when a scene falls apart. They started leaving. Just walking out, no longer committed to playing their roles. But what I noticed most was Eli's face. My son looked like someone had taken everything he believed in and smashed it on the ground. And I realized, standing there in that moment of triumph, that I didn't feel victorious at all. I felt sad. Because I just destroyed my son's wedding, and I was going to have to live with that. But sometimes, you have to let someone hit rock bottom before they can start climbing back up. Eli showed up at my house 3 weeks later. I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight. His hair was a mess. He was wearing a hoodie with a hole in the sleeve, and his eyes had the look of someone who hasn't slept in days. "Dad," he said when I opened the door. His voice cracked on that one word. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and let him in. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Harper had looked at my hands like they were something disgusting. He put his head in his hands and he just sat there, not talking, not moving, just breathing. After a while, I made coffee. I didn't ask him any questions. I just put a cup in front of him and sat down across from him. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "I'm so sorry, Dad." I wanted to gloat. I wanted to tell him I told him so. I wanted to say a lot of things that would have felt good for about 5 seconds and then felt terrible forever. Instead, I said, "Tell me what happened." He looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "After you left, everything fell apart. Harper cried for 2 hours, then she yelled at me for ruining her life. She said the marriage was off. She said she was going to sue me for emotional damages. She said a lot of things." He paused. But none of it mattered. Because I finally understood what I'd done. "And what was that?" I asked, though I already knew. "I'd become someone I hated," he said. "I'd spent so much time trying to be someone she would want that I forgot to be someone I could respect. And I made you, the one person who actually mattered, feel small so I could feel big." I didn't respond right away. I let that sink in. The wedding night, everything was chaos. Her family, the real one, I guess, or whoever they actually are, just disappeared. 1 minute they were there, the next they were gone. I realized I didn't even know their real names. I'd paid thousands of dollars to know people that didn't actually exist. He picked up the coffee, but his hands were shaking so bad he set it back down. I went to HR at my job and asked if they had any positions in our trade services division. Lower pay, less prestigious, but honest work. They thought I was crazy at first, but I convinced them. I start next week. They're going to train me in project management for our construction contracts. I felt something shift in my chest. That was the first thing I'd heard him say that sounded like my son. "And Harper?" I asked. "Divorce papers. She's gone. Moved back to New York. I'm told she's still with the talent agency, but now people know she's a client, not just an actress. Her stock has gone down quite a bit." He looked up at me. I don't feel good about that. But I also don't feel bad. That's called acceptance, I said. He stayed for dinner. Then he stayed for the night. Then he asked if he could stay for a while. I told him yes. Over the next few weeks, he moved back home. He helped me with odd jobs around the house. We worked on people's cars together, just like we used to when he was a kid. One day, about 2 weeks after he'd arrived, he was helping me replace a carburetor in Mrs. Henderson's Honda, and he said, "Dad, I want to teach. I want to teach kids at the trade school. I want to show them that there's no shame in honest work. That fixing something with your own hands means something." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw the boy I'd raised. The one who was proud of where he came from. The one who understood that character matters more than reputation. "I'm proud of you," I said. And he smiled. Not the fake smile he'd learned from Harper. A real one. The kind that comes from inside. Our relationship would never be exactly the same. Healing from betrayal takes time, and the scar tissue is permanent. But we were building something again. Something that actually meant something. Something real. People often ask me if I regret exposing Harper at the wedding. If I regret humiliating my son in front of 300 people. And honestly, I used to think the answer was no. But as time has passed, I've learned that the truth is more complicated than that. I don't regret telling the truth. But I regret how I told it. I regret doing it publicly. I regret not finding a way to handle it privately first, to give my son a chance to fix things himself before I exposed everyone. But I can't change what happened. What I can do is learn from it. And what I learned is that sometimes when you feel like you're backed into a corner, you make decisions you wouldn't normally make. Sometimes being underestimated makes you dangerous, not because you're mean, but because you stop thinking about consequences. Eli now works at the Cincinnati Trade Institute, teaching young people about automotive repair. He's passionate about it. He tells me all the time about students who come from nothing, just like we did, and who are learning that they have value, that their work has value, that they don't need to become someone else to be worthy of respect. Harper. The internet did what the internet does. Her face got attached to that story, and she became a symbol of phoniness. Last I heard, she's working as a hostess at a restaurant somewhere outside Boston, and nobody recognizes her because she was famous for being fake, and now that everyone knows she's fake, there's nothing left. As for Ray, the private investigator, I paid him what I owed him, and he moved on to other cases. He never said I was right or wrong to do what I did. He just said, "Everyone's got to make their own choices, Franklin." I just found the information. But here's what I want to tell you, the people watching this story. Here's the real moral of all this. The opposite of love isn't hatred. It's shame. When you're ashamed of where you come from, you'll do anything to escape it. You'll pay for fake families. You'll abandon the people who raised you. You'll spend your entire life trying to become someone else, and you'll never actually get there because you're running from yourself. My son learned that lesson the hard way. But he learned it. And now he's helping other people avoid making the same mistake. I'm not perfect. I made mistakes with how I handled the wedding situation. But I did it because I couldn't stand by and watch my son destroy himself. Sometimes love means showing people the truth, even when they're not ready to hear it. Even when it hurts. Money doesn't buy you character. Designer clothes don't buy you respect. A fake family can't buy you belonging. The only thing that buys those things is time, effort, and honesty. It's the things you do when nobody's watching. It's how you treat the people who have nothing left to give you. It's who you are when the performance is over and everyone goes home. That's what my father taught me. That's what I tried to teach Eli. And that's what I'm sharing with you now. If you've ever felt judged for where you come from, If you've ever been made to feel small because you didn't have enough money or the right connections, I want you to know something. Your worth isn't determined by your zip code. Your value isn't measured in your bank account. You are enough, exactly as you are right now. But also know this, if you're ashamed of where you came from, that shame will follow you everywhere. You can't outrun it. The only way to get free from it is to stop running and turn around and face it. Accept it. Own it. And then move forward knowing that it doesn't define you. Your choices do. Now, if this story has touched your heart, if it's made you think about your own life and the choices you're making, I'm asking you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next story we share with you. Because there are more stories coming. More real stories from real people who've learned hard lessons about what actually matters in life. And I'm asking you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you've been in a situation like Eli's, where you felt ashamed of your background. Tell me if you've ever had to speak a hard truth to someone you love. Tell me your story. Because this isn't just about me and my son. This is about all of us. This is about the human experience of trying to find our place in a world that's constantly telling us we're not good enough. Your comments matter. Your stories matter. They inspire other people who are watching, who are struggling with the same issues. When you share your experience, you help someone else feel less alone. So please, subscribe. Turn on notifications. And share this story with someone who needs to hear it. There's one more thing I want to tell you before we go. About a month after Eli moved back home, I was working in the garage on a Saturday morning. He was helping me with a transmission rebuild on an old Ford. And he said something that I'll never forget. He said, "Dad, I want to show my kids someday that this work, the work you taught me, is something to be proud of. I want to show them that you don't need money to have dignity. You don't need to pretend to be someone else to be valuable." And I realized something right then. The wedding incident, as painful as it was, as much as I regret how I handled it, it wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. It was the moment when my son finally understood what I'd been trying to teach him his whole life. Sometimes the truth needs to be exposed publicly for people to really hear it. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted before you can find what actually matters. But here's what happened next that I didn't see coming. About 3 months after all this, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. It was from someone who claimed to know Harper. And what they told me, well, let's just say Harper's story doesn't end the way you might think it does. Don't miss the next story. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications. And I'll see you in the next chapter.